Hi sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash the subscribe button, turn on the notification so you get notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all, and I want to say a very big thank you to every one of you for always coming back, always coming through to watch my videos and subscribing. You all are the real MVPs. Today we'll be checking out the Orange Bird Massacre, which happened in February 8, 1968. This might not be well known to some people, and a lot of you might also know about it. And if you do know about it, why not? Feel free to also let us know in the comment section. So with that being said, I am going to roll the clip and we will come back to talk about it. So stay glued to the screen. Let's get into this video.
I found the perfect lighting right here in front of my Christmas tree, so I think I'm gonna stand here for this video. If you're a real one, you know that Black Wall Street, the history of Black Wall Street, is already up on my page, but in this video I want to talk about the Orangeburg Massacre, which I'm pretty sure most of you guys don't know about because it's pretty non-existent in civil rights history. It's not that it's not known or recognized, it's just that we don't learn about it when we learn about the civil rights movement in our US history books. Let's get into it. So it's the 1960s. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is just passed. It desegregates much of the South, but white identities rooted in this separation, rooted in this segregation, they were going to need a little more time to change. Not every white person in the South shared this identity, but one such person was Harry Floyd. Now, he was owner of the All-Star Bowling Triangle Bowling Alley in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He said, nope, I am exempt from these segregation laws because this is my private property. Now understand this, at the time there are two universities in South Carolina State University and Claflin University. So in this southern state, South Carolina, there are way more educated black people who are invested in the civil rights movement and turning the tide of racism in these cities. Now, it's February 5th, 1968, right? A small group of students from each university in South Carolina decides that we're going to go to this all-star bowling alley and we're just going to sit outside and protest. Obviously, Harry Floyd, he decides, hey, I'm not letting you guys in, and the group actually leaves peacefully. Now, this did not stop word from spreading around campus like wildfire. The students were outraged. The next night, February 6th, an even larger crowd of students showed up to the bowling alley. This time, they were met by police who threatened to spray them with water hoses if they didn't leave. Students did taunt police by lighting matches, and when a glass window was broken, police began beating students, both male and female, with billy clubs. Some students were arrested and some students were sent to the hospital due to this confrontation. Word spread around campus quickly again, and this time it led to insecurity with white store owners who armed themselves. Governor Robert McNair even insisted that Black Power leaders were orchestrating the student violence. Now he calls in the National Guard, tanks and all, because of the anticipated violence. Now this prompts students to join forces with civil rights activist Cleveland Sellers, who had graduated from Howard University in 1967. The government viewed him as a danger and a black militant. On February 8th, Cleveland Sellers and hundreds of students gathered on South Carolina State's campus to protest this bowling alley and other privately owned businesses and all the segregation. Plenty of National Guard troops and heavy law enforcement were armed with shotguns and buckshot, and they were there to prevent the students from starting a riot, like if you want to know what happens in part 2. Stop scrolling if you don't know what happened on February 8th, 1968 at South Carolina State University. Now, if you really don't know, you're going to have to go back to my page and watch part 1. But if you're with me, let's continue on with part 2. Keontae, I'm not going and finding it on your page. Just give us a recap real quick. Fine. The National Guard has just been called in. Law enforcement is prevalent at South Carolina State University as hundreds of students have gathered alongside civil rights activist Cleveland Sellers to protest segregation in the city of Orangeburg, South Carolina. Now that we're all caught up, let's dive back into it. Tensions are high. The protest is in full effect. Heavily armed soldiers are on standby, and it's pitch black. It's nighttime. Now the confrontation ensues and students start a bonfire at the entrance to campus that burns for some time but is ordered to be put out by authorities. Now, while a police officer is putting out the fire, he is struck in the back with a wooden banister. And while everyone is wondering what happened, what is going on, South Carolina Highway Patrol officers unleash gunfire on the crowd of over 200 students. Police fired into the crowd with guns, including shotguns and revolvers, for 10 to 15 seconds in the dark. In this, at least 28 students are shot and wounded. Cleveland Sellers is shot in the armpit, and 3 students are killed. Freshman Sammy Heyman was shot in the back. 17-year-old high school student Delano Middleton, whose mother worked at SC State, was shot 7 times, and 18-year-old Henry Smith was shot 3 times. These 3 men lost their lives at a student protest at South Carolina State University over the racial segregation in Orangeburg, South Carolina. That's what the media should have put out to historically symbolize what happened that night, but that is far from what happened. He was accused of using America's fear of black power to incite violence in students who would have never incited a riot on their own. But remember, this whole thing was started by just students who were discriminated against at a bowling alley. This bowling alley, to be exact. So would the students have stood up against racial segregation in their city? They already had. The press widely ignored the outcomes of this event as well. And when the Associated Press did cover it, they said the students were armed, fired first, and exchanged gunfire with police officers. The black community was enraged and took to the streets of South Carolina's capital, Columbia, to protest. U.S. history makes it seem like Martin Luther King lived centuries ago, but he's right here in 1968 sending a telegram to Lyndon B. Johnson stating that the deaths in Orangeburg lie on the conscience of Chief Strom and the government of South Carolina. 70 officers at the protest that night, 9 charged and all acquitted. Cleveland Sellers had to work a year of hard labor.
Man, I know they were gonna lie that the students were armed. Like, where did they get the guns from? And it's why is it that each time like black people want to stand up for something that is being done to them, like the segregation, it's something is like they are eventually going to come up with something that will make it sound like they were doing something very horrible. They were doing something very bad. That was why what happened. And then the other one was shot 7 times. 7 times. And you are telling me, I mean, it was a mistake. The other one was shot 3 times. Somebody want to tell me from somewhere that that was a mistake. You shot somebody the first one, the second one, the third one, 4th, and somebody's going to tell me, oh, it was, I mean, it's so terrible, you know, that something that started way back, like, you know, the segregation that has been there all those years till this very moment is still here. And they are not seeing it like something is wrong. They are not seeing it that, man, I think we have a problem because you can't keep treating people so bad and expect them to keep quiet. The truth is that, do not worry, that day is gonna come. And the truth is that they are so scared. They are very scared. They don't want to lose this, their white supremacists or something, because that is the only thing they got. So they are trying so hard as much as they can to hold it so tight, because if the coin flips, let's continue.
Remembering the Orangeburg Massacre. On this day, 1968, South Carolina state troopers opened fire on students protesting racial discrimination in Orangeburg, South Carolina, killing 3 and injuring 28. It all started with a segregated bowling alley, something that shouldn't have still existed in 1968. Nearby South Carolina State college students took the lead in demanding the bowling alley desegregate by leading sit-ins and protests. Tensions were high as the police presence grew in response to these actions. On the night of February 8th, 200 students gathered on campus to protest the racial discrimination and violence of the last few days. Chaos erupted as police started firing into the crowd when a shot from a deputy to calm the crowd startled police as they thought the shot came from protesters. 3 young men lost their lives: Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton. Over 28 others were wounded as they fled. No officer was convicted. This event was the first time police killed students on their own campus. 2 years before the Kent State Massacre. The tragedy did not gain much national attention and has been largely forgotten and suppressed. Today, we remember and stand with the brave protesters in the South who stood up and continue to stand up for racial justice in the face of state violence.
On February 5, 1968, students at South Carolina State University staged a protest at the All-Star Bowling Lane in Orangeburg, South Carolina. While segregation laws by 1968 were unconstitutional, the effects and attitudes of Jim Crow still prolonged. The protest was peaceful, as demonstrators left the bowling alley after its owner, Harry K. Floyd, demanded they leave. It was because Floyd refused to integrate the bowling alley that these protests were going on. The very next night, February 6, more students arrived to protest. This time, the police were waiting for the protesters. In response to law enforcement rounding up the protesters, more protesters came. Because more protesters arrived, civil unrest broke out as the police began attacking the protesters. Blaming the Black Power movement, South Carolina's Governor Robert McNair activated the National Guard to deal with the protesters. On February 8th, protesters started a bonfire on SC State's campus, taunting law enforcement and the National Guard as they tried to put it out. When an officer got hit with a wooden banister, law enforcement opened fire on the protesters. Of the 200 protesters, 27 were injured and 3 were killed. 2 of the 3 were South Carolina State students Henry Smith and Samuel Hammond Jr., and a high school student, Delano Middleton, who had been waiting for his mother to get off of work. The shootings were condemned. Governor McNair again blamed the Orangeburg Massacre on the Black Power agitators. Despite the condemnation, and with no solid evidence, those charged with the shootings were acquitted of all charges. Meanwhile, despite having no solid evidence, protester Cleveland Sellers was convicted of inciting a riot and was sentenced to a year of hard labor.
On February 8, 1968, white state troopers fired into a mostly African-American crowd on the campus of South Carolina State College, a historically black college in Orangeburg, South Carolina. In what became known as the Orangeburg Massacre, the troops shot and wounded 28 people and killed 3 black male students: Samuel Hammond, 18, a freshman from Florida; Henry Smith, 18, a sophomore from Marion, South Carolina; and Delano Middleton, 17, an Orangeburg High School student. 2 days before the shooting, SCSC students had attempted to desegregate a local whites-only bowling alley. When the owner refused to serve the students, violence ensued, leaving 9 students and 1 officer wounded. On the day of the shooting, students again protested the segregated bowling alley, this time building a bonfire in the street. Escorted by police armed with carbines, pistols, and riot guns, the fire department arrived to extinguish the fire. Police then fired into the crowd as students fled for safety. Police later claimed they were attacked first. South Carolina Governor Robert McNair blamed, quote, Black Power advocates, unquote, for the violence and insisted officers had fired in self-defense while under attack from campus snipers. Witness accounts from reporters, firemen, and students contradicted this story. They reported that officers had fired on the crowd without warning. No evidence was ever presented that the protesters were armed. None of the 9 officers charged for their roles in the shooting were convicted of any wrongdoing, but Cleveland Sellers, a young black man and program director of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, was convicted of rioting for his role in leading the protests. He served 7 months in jail and was not pardoned until 1993.
And I am very sure that to this very moment, nobody was questioned, nobody was convicted, nobody took responsibilities of what happened or something like that. Of course, there are black people. Why would they want to, furthermore the investigation or what happened? Because you are a black, of course, it happened in black community. So black community or black people are danger to our lives. So yeah, and that is the end of it. To this very moment, did anything happen? Nothing happened. Did anybody take responsibilities for what happened? Nobody did. Nobody at all. Anyways, this is where I am gonna call it a day. Let me know what you all think in the comment section and see you all in my next video. Bye for now.